family came from Poland, moved to France just before the Second World War. His father joined the armed forces and was one of the very few people in the French armed forces who actually died defending Paris. On top of that, his mother was taken away and died in one of the German concentration camps. And what's going on in the background of my life at the moment is I've just been running a writer's course for would-be writers. I'm a writer and an illustrator, and I've had a number of books out, and so hooray, lucky me. And I also help other people who want to do that. One-to-one session you can have with me for 15 minutes. If you want to write a book and you're serious about writing a book, you can just book that on there. So if you click this, it goes to a thing here which tells you more, and then you can book a slot. So I wrote a blog post about writing reviews on Amazon because I was cheesed off about getting a negative review, and there are some of them. This is my website, so you can click to see some of the other ones. One of the ways to get anything done and out there is just to get it out there, whether it's good or not, whether it's perfect or not, because it's never going to be perfect. It's only going to be slightly less imperfect with a bit more revision. So having told all these would-be writers that they might want to start creating things and putting them out there, I thought I would do that, but I'm not writing it, I'm doing these live streams. And what I seem to be doing on these live streams is just flicking through the books that I like and thinking about some of the things that I've usually made marks about. So I write on them and maybe little comments and things. And also, I love this because one of the jobs that he had early on was simply typing up academic research, but he used to do things like that. He would type it up, and bear in mind he was doing this on an old-fashioned typewriter. He would type it up playfully into funny shapes like that. It takes quite a lot of thinking, that kind of thing. So what he was doing was making patterns out of text, and that's very much how his mind worked. And it says here, Perec hardly ever typed anything straight the first time off. He would always put in his own red herrings, puns, irreverent asides, fancy layouts, subversions of every imaginable kind. So the point that I'm making is that he was being really playful in that way, even when he was not well known as a writer and when he had this full-time job. But that kind of way of being playful continued throughout his writing career in a certain way. So the classic example of that is he wrote a novel without using the letter E, which is as hard to do in French as it is in English. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of like funny and everything, but I don't want to read that. And why would you do it? And isn't it a bit stupid and pointless? But actually, one of the things that I found out from this book about Perec is the background story of his life. His family came from Poland, moved to France just before the Second World War. His father joined the armed forces and was one of the very few people in the French armed forces who actually died defending Paris. On top of that, his mother was taken away and died in one of the German concentration camps. Now, this is relevant to the book that doesn't have the letter E. If you bear in mind that book, in French, it's called La Disparition, which means the disappearance or the disappearance. La Disparition, the disappearance. And that actually, as I found out from reading this book, that is the name of the document, Acte de Disparition, the document which after the war was sent to Perec to confirm that his mother had officially disappeared. But it's obviously a really important document in a man's life, the one that says, yes, your mother disappeared. And also maybe there's a way of saying, a way of thinking that having no mother and having lost his father as well, just when he was a little boy, is a bit like struggling through life, is a bit like writing a novel without the letter E. He was in the Guinness Book of Records for the longest palindrome. Let me just see if I can find a bit about the palindrome. Palindrome 428 to 430. Thanks for bearing with me. Peric's Great Palindrome is about, guess how long? Like 25 letters, 30 letters, whatever. No, Peric's Great Palindrome is about 500 words long in each direction. And it earned him a place in the Guinness Book of Records. For that alone, I would say that's just like brilliant. So here's another example. Okay, it's not what this book points out is that Peric didn't write a so-called perfect palindrome, which says exactly the same thing in both directions. Like, for example, Madam, I'm Adam. If you reverse it, it still says Madam, I'm Adam. But what Peric wrote was a twin palindrome, which has a certain sense this direction. And then if you turn it around, it still makes sense, but it's not the same in both directions. But 500 words long, can you even begin to make sense of that? The Great Palindrome must have been the very hardest of texts to write, and it's undeniably difficult to read. When you know it's a palindrome, you tend to see nothing but the palindromic design. But in Manchester in 1989, unsigned handwritten versions were given to students and teachers of French who were asked respectively to use it for the exercise of explaining a text, as you do when you're a language student, and to mark it as if it was an essay. Peric's palindrome barely made sense to the readers. Some teachers took it for the work of an incompetent student, while others suspected they'd been treated to a surrealist text. Those with a psychiatric interest identified the author as an adolescent in a dangerously paranoid state. Those who had not forgotten the swinging 60s wondered if it was LSD or marijuana that generated the disconnected images of the text. Either way, readers seemed to project their own positive and negative fantasies onto Peric's palindrome. So there's a really lovely paradox at the heart of everything about George Peric and the way that he approached writing. And David Bellos summed it up beautifully. Peric felt profoundly liberated by the constraints he imposed on his writing. He was just absolutely in love with that stuff. And reading this book made me understand why that bizarre way of thinking kind of is really wonderful, actually. And I really, my heart went out to Georges Peric. After reading this, in fact, I'm going to read it again soon. I'm going to flick through it again because it's a bit unfresh for me. But one of the things that he came up with did influence this book. Peric, or one of his friends, but certainly the people who he hung out with, and probably him, came up with a structure for writing things, which was to take a sentence and use only the capital letters of the main substantive, the nouns and the verbs and the main things. So not the or of, but the key words to a sentence. So I used that structure in my book. I'll read it. It's one of the poems. And this book's called Psalms for the City. So it's not the Psalms from the Bible, it's my version, but this one is basically, it's a game by Georges Peric. The L is my S, I shall not W. If you've ever come across the Psalms in the Bible, you probably know the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So that's what I took as a sentence. I was writing Psalms for the City. I knew they weren't going to be my Psalms, but I knew people would be thinking of the Psalms. So I wanted to borrow a structure, and Peric leapt into my mind. That's why I'm doing this book review on Amazon. Gosh, I'd better get on with it. It's going to be the football any second. So the L is my S, I shall not W. Instead of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, I wrote, the lawn is my square mile, I shall not wander. The lifestyle is my shackle, I shall not whistle. The limited is my shame, I shall not whitewash. The litter is my shadow, I shall not waste. The lyric is my shiatsu, I shall not wince. The link is my shortcut, I shall not wait. The loft is my St. Paul's. I shall not whine. The laugh is my shalom. I shall not withhold. So that poem, which I have now read, is largely inspired by Georges Perec, an incredibly playful man whose play seemed to be really brought out by structural limits and constraints. In the run-up to Christmas, I'm going to be doing a few bits of online pilgrimage, as I call it, where I walk around on Google Street View. I did this in lockdown, basically, with people, and I'd wander around and look at places. I just want to look at his home because locations and things were really important to Perec. I might have to come back to this. He did all sorts of things where he would go to certain places and then go back to them years later to look again at another, and he would write about them. And so this is a whole other thing, one of his patterning things. But I need to find one of the places that counts best. Izzy and Cecile lived at number 24 Rue Villa. So that's what we're going to look at right now. Going to do a quick desktop pilgrimage to see the home of Perec. Rue Villa in Paris. Let's have a look. And then we have to look for number 24. It's probably changed, but here we are. So they came from somewhere in Poland, over there. Can't remember where. I'm not going to look it up now. But then they ended up at Rue Villa. So I said 24, didn't I? Let's have a look. Okay, this is what I call a little, it's all been rebuilt, hasn't it? Look. Look, that's Rue des Couronnes. Let's see, where's Rue Villa? Rue des Couronnes. Oh, you can't get onto Rue Villa. I guess that there is Rue Villa. Yeah, let's have a look. If I go to Rue Julien Lacroix and then look around Rue Julien Lacroix. Yeah, that's kind of pedestrianised, isn't it? So this is Belleville, where Georges Perec lived. You can barely see it because it's all carved up in stickers, but it does say Rue Villa 24, somewhere down here. It's obviously all been rebuilt. Many moutons. I ended up there, didn't want to do. Go back here. Rue Villa in the 20th arrondissement. Little pilgrimage to say hello to Georges Perec, or at least to the place where his parents once lived. Changed now beyond all recognition because it's all been rebuilt, but there we are. But one I won't mention them all, but this one I'm really pleased with. It's a weekly webinar, live webinar with me on Zoom, so you can communicate with me on Zoom. And it's about making books out of a single sheet of paper, believe it or not, and then turning one of those into a bigger thing. So here is a selection of those books which have been bound together and then with a wraparound cover. So this is very rudimentary, but it is a book, and it's a first version of the book. So I'm doing those on Monday afternoons at 4:30 p.m. And if you want to catch those, you need to register, and you can watch the catch-ups if you register, if you missed the last one. Thanks for watching this live stream.